She could not even read the menu, yet her violin made billionaires fall silent. That was the irony, the scandal, and perhaps the cruelest joke of all. For weeks, the city's elite whispered about this wedding, the one meant to unite two dynasties and cement power across industries. They called it a marriage bet, as though love were a game of cards played over champagne. But in that glittering ballroom, under chandeliers that dripped light like diamonds, it was not the bride or the groom who seized the night. It was the servant, the girl no one saw until her music tore open every secret the family tried to bury. The mansion stretched wide, a fortress of marble and legacy. Generations of Whitmore men had walked its halls, their portraits staring down with eyes that judged both the living and the dead. Tonight, it was dressed for spectacle. Roses imported from Italy, crystal flown in from Paris, a string quartet imported from Vienna. And yet, at the center of this luxury, it was Naomi, the maid who polished the silverware and carried linens, who held the bow steady against her violin, coaxing life into the air. She was 23, with skin that gleamed under candlelight like polished mahogany. Her hair, braided tight, framed her face in a crown of resilience, though her uniform screamed subservience. To the Whitmores, she was background noise. To the groom, Adrian, she was something far more dangerous. The echo of freedom, the reminder that beneath his tailored suit, he still had a heart that beat for something beyond duty. The bride, Isabella, floated through the crowd like porcelain on display. Her gown was an ocean of silk, her smile rehearsed until it cracked at the edges. She knew this marriage was not hers but her family's. Her father had called it the culmination of generations of sacrifice. Her mother had whispered, "Do this for us, darling, and you'll never want for anything." But Isabella's eyes betrayed her. She was terrified. She knew the groom's heart was not hers to claim. She had seen the way he lingered when Naomi's bow met string, how his gaze softened into something that no wealth could fabricate. The first note struck and the ballroom changed. Naomi played a hymn, not the waltz she had been instructed. It was raw, aching, filled with centuries of pain passed down through bloodlines torn apart by chains and scars. The guests shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to applaud or to demand silence. Adrian's chest tightened. Isabella's breath caught. For in that melody lay a confession, though no words were spoken. Love existed here, forbidden and burning, between servant and master. Whispers spread like wildfire. Why that song? Who let her play it? Does she even know what she's doing? But Naomi knew exactly. She had rehearsed this rebellion in her mind, night after night, each time Adrian brushed past her in hallways where servants were not supposed to meet the eyes of the family. Each time he lingered too long near the kitchen, pretending he needed water but truly seeking her voice in the shadows. Each time his hand had almost touched hers and then retreated, like a coward, afraid of the world that would tear them both apart. Adrian was 32, groomed for power, heir to the Whitmore empire. His jaw was sharp, his shoulders broad, but his heart was fragile under layers of expectation. He had spent years becoming the man his parents demanded, the man who would carry their name into politics and profit. Yet, in the quiet of Naomi's company, he had felt something he had never known, truth. She did not bow to him, not in spirit. She challenged, teased, reminded him of the injustice in the walls that caged them both. He loved her, though he dared not say it. Not until tonight. The Whitmores prided themselves on lineage. "We are not racists," his mother, Eleanor, often claimed, while instructing the staff not to hire too many of them. Hypocrisy dressed in pearls, wielding charity galas like weapons of image. His father, Charles, a man carved from steel and old money, treated marriage like war. To him, Adrian's union with Isabella was conquest. Her family's shipping fortune would merge with their political influence. Nothing else mattered. Not love. Not happiness. Certainly not the heart of a servant girl. And yet, as Naomi's music soared, Adrian's resolve cracked. He saw her not as a maid, but as the woman who had laughed with him when he confessed he hated caviar, who had patched his shirt when he tore it climbing the orchard fence, who had whispered, "You're more than their heir," when he thought himself nothing at all. She had saved him piece by piece without ever knowing it. And now she risked everything to speak through song. The guests applauded half-heartedly when the piece ended, though the tension was thick enough to choke on. Eleanor rose, her smile venom-wrapped in grace. "That was unexpected," she said, voice slicing across the hall. "Naomi, darling, perhaps you should fetch the champagne instead." It was dismissal, exile dressed as civility. Naomi's hands shook as she lowered her bow. But Adrian stood. "No," he said, louder than he intended. The room stilled. Hundreds of eyes turned, each more curious than kind. "Let her play." His words were not a request. They were defiance. His father's jaw clenched. Isabella's lips parted. Naomi's heart hammered. "Adrian," Eleanor hissed. "This is neither the time nor the place." "It is exactly the time," he interrupted. His chest burned, his palms sweat, but he could no longer be silent. "We sit here in a hall built on the backs of servants and slaves, pretending we are noble, while the only true nobility is in her music. If you cannot hear it, then you are deaf not only to her but to truth itself." Gasps rippled. A senator coughed into his drink. Someone whispered, "He's lost his mind." But Naomi's eyes filled with tears she dared not shed in front of them. For the first time, Adrian had spoken aloud what she always knew. He was not ashamed of her. Charles rose, fury radiating. "Enough," he thundered. "Sit down, Adrian. This is your wedding, not a stage for a servant's fantasy." But Adrian did not sit. He looked at Isabella, who nodded once, almost imperceptibly. She had known. She had always known. And in that nod was both her surrender and her liberation. She would not fight for a heart that was never hers. Naomi wanted to run. She wanted to flee before the walls collapsed, before the Whitmores destroyed her for daring to matter. But her feet refused. She stood frozen, violin clutched to her chest, as Adrian walked toward her through a sea of gasps and judgment. Each step he took was a rebellion, each breath an act of war against the empire that bore his name. He stopped a mere arm's length away. The music in his mind still vibrated in the air, even though the last note had fallen silent. Naomi's breathing was shallow, as if the sound of it might shatter everything. The ballroom, once gleaming with sophistication, now felt like a cage with invisible bars. The whispers of the guests had transformed into a low murmur, a tide of judgment that threatened to sweep over them both. Yet Adrian did not falter. He extended a hand, not the hand of a wealthy heir, not the hand of a man bound by expectation, but the hand of a human willing to stake everything on love. "Naomi," he said, voice trembling, "come with me, now." Her eyes widened. Every nerve in her body screamed that this was madness. To step forward was to risk scandal, expulsion, ruin. And yet, the weight of his gaze, the undeniable truth in his tone, rooted her to the spot. Slowly, reluctantly, she placed her violin in its case, her fingers brushing the wood with reverence, as if sealing the last barrier between her past and this uncertain future. The murmurs of the crowd rose into a crescendo of outrage. Eleanor Whitmore gasped audibly, "Adrian, this is outrageous." Her voice carried the authority of generations, yet it faltered under the intensity of her son's resolve. Charles rose from his chair, every muscle coiled like steel. "You disgrace this family," he growled. "You disgrace yourself." Adrian turned to face them fully, his shoulders squared, his heart pounding. "No, father, I am finally finding myself. And Naomi, she is not a disgrace. She is the most honest person in this room." Isabella, still in her gown of silk and pretense, watched silently. Tears stung the corners of her eyes. She had entered this wedding a puppet, but now she understood that even puppets could witness the breaking of strings. Her hands clenched at her sides as she absorbed the truth. This was not her story. This was a story of courage, of love that could not be caged by wealth, bloodlines, or race. Naomi's feet moved before she could think, crossing the expanse of polished marble toward him. Each step was electric, every whisper and judgment sliding off her like water. As she reached him, Adrian gently took her hand. It was warm, solid, grounding. In that touch lay a promise that neither fortune nor prejudice could sever. "Adrian," she whispered, voice barely audible over the rustle of gowns and clinking glasses. "You don't know what this could mean for you." "I do," he interrupted, squeezing her hand. "But I also know what it would mean if I didn't act. I can't live in fear of what society says." The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, and the occasional shout punctuated the tension. A cousin muttered, "This is a scandal," while a young socialite whispered, "Can you imagine the headlines?" But the couple hardly noticed. For the first time, they were not trapped by the expectations of others. They were free to define their own story. Eleanor stormed forward, her heels clicking sharply against the marble. She grabbed Adrian's arm with a force that spoke of both anger and desperation. "You will not ruin everything we've built. Do you understand me?" "Yes," Adrian replied softly, though his gaze never wavered from Naomi's. "I understand perfectly. And I also understand that nothing you've built means anything if it costs me my soul or hers." Naomi's eyes brimmed with tears she fought to contain. She had spent her life serving others, bending to their whims, hiding her own desires beneath a veneer of obedience. But this moment, fragile and electric, was hers, and Adrian had given her permission to exist, fully, openly, without shame. Charles slammed his hand against a table, making crystal tremble. "Do you think love excuses insolence? You will bring shame upon this family." "Shame?" Adrian's voice rose. "You speak of shame while ignoring every injustice, every lie, every prejudice that has built this so-called dynasty. I am done hiding. I am done lying. I choose truth. I choose her." The guests recoiled as if struck, some stepping back in fear, others in admiration. Naomi could feel the shift in the air, the silent acknowledgement that something unprecedented was unfolding. She drew in a breath, steadied by Adrian's presence. "Naomi," he whispered again, now gently lifting her chin so their eyes met. "We faced them together," and so they did. What followed was chaos, but of a kind that revealed the true nature of people. Some guests, still clinging to their inherited prejudices, left the hall without ceremony. Others, moved by courage they had not dared to summon themselves, stayed. Isabella, composed but trembling, finally approached Naomi. Her voice was soft, yet carried authority. "I see now. He loves you, and you are remarkable. Don't let them take that away." Naomi nodded, a mix of gratitude and disbelief overwhelming her. The social hierarchies that had defined her life moments ago were crumbling, revealing a truth she had only dreamed of. That love, in its purest form, was stronger than fear, stronger than wealth, stronger than the judgment of 1,000 generations. The music that Naomi had played still lingered in the room, though no bow moved across strings. Her courage, mirrored in Adrian's defiance, had created a melody far more powerful than any she had ever performed. The evening spiraled into confrontation and revelation. Eleanor attempted to dictate a course of action, but her voice faltered as more family secrets surfaced. It was revealed, in hushed whispers, that some members of the Whitmore lineage had themselves crossed boundaries of race and class in the past, yet had conveniently erased these acts from memory to maintain the illusion of superiority. The hypocrisy was glaring, undeniable, and it further weakened their authority over Adrian's choices. Charles, though outwardly unyielding, found himself trapped in the web of history and exposure. For the first time, he could not summon the power of intimidation to suppress the truth. His rage simmered, but his hands trembled slightly, an uncharacteristic crack in the armor of a man who had always ruled through fear. Adrian led Naomi to the balcony overlooking the gardens, away from the immediate tension of the main hall. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of roses and wet stone, the world suddenly vast and infinite. Naomi exhaled slowly, leaning into him, feeling the solidity of their union in a way she had never imagined possible. "Do you think they'll ever accept us?" she asked quietly. Adrian turned her face toward his, brushing a stray braid from her forehead. "I don't know," he admitted, "and maybe some will never accept us. But we have each other, and that is everything." Naomi smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that had been rare in her life. "Then that's enough. That has to be enough." As they stood on the balcony, the faint sounds of the guests' disputes echoing behind them, a sense of liberation settled over both. The walls that had confined them, the walls of wealth, expectation, race, and class were still there, but they no longer held the power they once did. For the first time, Adrian and Naomi were architects of their own fate. Back inside, Isabella quietly excused herself, retreating from the spotlight with a newfound clarity. She had witnessed a love that defied convention, and in doing so, she had glimpsed her own potential for independence. Perhaps one day she would understand what it meant to live authentically, without the chains of expectation. Meanwhile, some guests had begun to reconcile with what they had witnessed. A few brave souls approached Adrian and Naomi, offering tentative congratulations, their voices hesitant but sincere. Others lingered in silence, unsure whether to condemn or admire the audacity of defiance. But in every gaze, every whispered word, the undeniable fact remained. History was being rewritten in that very moment. Naomi, sensing the shift in energy, felt a surge of empowerment. She realized that her music had been more than a melody. It had been a declaration, a bridge between worlds that were supposed to remain separate. And Adrian's willingness to stand with her had transformed that bridge into a path forward, a path where love could flourish without apology. Hours passed. The crowd thinned, the echoes of scandal fading into a quiet hum of conversation. Adrian and Naomi remained in each other's arms on the balcony, finding solace in the simplicity of their togetherness. They had faced the full force of societal pressure, confronted family prejudice, and yet emerged with hearts unbroken, spirits unbowed. At last, Naomi rested her head against Adrian's chest. "Do you think we'll ever be normal?" she murmured. Adrian kissed the top of her head gently. "Normal doesn't exist, but we have truth, and that is stronger than anything else." The night stretched on, a tapestry of stars illuminating the mansion's gardens. Within the walls of marble and legacy, two souls had carved out a space for authenticity, for courage, for love. And though the world outside might still resist, in that moment they were free. They had faced judgment, defiance, and betrayal. They had confronted the ghosts of family expectations and societal constraints. And through it all, they had discovered that the only authority that truly mattered was the one they held over their own lives. The first rays of dawn began to pierce the horizon. Adrian and Naomi stood together, hand in hand, looking out at a world that, while imperfect, was full of possibilities. Their journey had only just begun, but they faced it unafraid, emboldened by the undeniable truth that love, when true and unyielding, could transcend every barrier. The morning sun bathed the mansion in golden light, softening the harsh edges of the previous night's upheaval. Naomi and Adrian remained on the balcony, wrapped in a quiet intimacy that no one could touch. Yet even in this serenity, they knew the challenges were only beginning. The Whitmore family, with their influence and pride, would not relinquish control easily. But the strength they had discovered in each other was a fortress far more resilient than marble or tradition. Adrian broke the silence, voice low but steady. "We need to face them, Naomi. Not in anger, but with clarity. This Familimi family must understand that love isn't a game. And I will not apologize for choosing you." Naomi nodded, though a flutter of fear still gripped her. She had never been part of a world that moved with such power and scrutiny. Yet the courage that had carried her through last night still lingered, tempered by the knowledge that Adrian would not let her face it alone. They entered the main hall together. The room was quiet, the guests who remained still processing the shockwaves of the previous evening. Eleanor sat in her high-backed chair, pearls clinking as she shifted. Charles stood stiffly beside her, arms crossed, face carved into a mask of disapproval. But this time Adrian did not flinch. "Mother, father," he began, voice firm, Last night was not an accident. Naomi's music revealed truths you have tried to bury for generations. I am asking you now, as your son, to see beyond wealth and status. To see her for who she is, brave, talented, compassionate, and wholly deserving of respect. Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line, eyes narrowing. You would bring ruin upon everything we've built, Adrian. This relationship, it will not be tolerated. Adrian stepped closer, unwavering. You built empires, but you cannot build hearts. And my heart belongs to Naomi. It always has. No dynasty, no wealth, no social expectation can change that. You can fight me, you can shame me, but you cannot erase this truth. Charles's face darkened, but before he could respond, Naomi spoke, her voice quiet but carrying an undeniable authority. I am not asking for your permission. I am not here to take anything from you. I am here because I deserve to exist in a world that sees me as human, not as a servant or a shadow. I love Adrian, and he loves me. That is not a scandal, it is a fact. The room fell silent. Words that had been held back for generations finally hung in the air, impossible to ignore. The social elite, accustomed to controlling every narrative, found themselves powerless against authenticity and courage. One by one, family members spoke, some with hesitation, others with curiosity. A distant aunt whispered, "Perhaps, love is stronger than we think." A cousin, flushed with embarrassment, muttered, "I never realized." The cracks in the Whitmore facade were widening, revealing the humanity they had long denied. Isabella, still present, approached Naomi cautiously. "You are remarkable," she said softly, her voice shaking. "I was meant to be the bride, the perfect image. But watching you, seeing how Adrian looks at you, I understand now. True love cannot be forced." Naomi felt a surge of gratitude, though her heart ached for the young woman who had been trapped in duty and expectation. "Thank you," she replied, voice gentle. "I hope you find a way to be free too." The day passed with tension gradually easing into cautious understanding. Not all hearts had shifted, but a foundation had been laid, a recognition that love and integrity could coexist with legacy, if one was brave enough to claim it. Adrian and Naomi spent the next weeks navigating the delicate balance between rebellion and reconciliation. Public appearances, family dinners, and high society gatherings became arenas where they demonstrated the strength of their union. Each act of normalcy was revolutionary. A hand held in public, a whispered word of defiance, a quiet laugh shared amidst scrutiny. In these moments, Naomi discovered new facets of herself. She no longer moved through the world as merely a shadow behind others. She was seen, acknowledged, and celebrated not just for her talent, but for her courage and dignity. Adrian, too, grew into a deeper understanding of himself. He had long lived in the shadow of expectation, but with Naomi by his side, he discovered the joy of authenticity. Together, they became architects of a life that refused to be constrained by the prejudices of old money or old traditions. Even Eleanor Whitmore, though slow to accept, began to soften. She could not openly approve, not entirely, but the glimmer of recognition in her eyes betrayed the beginnings of understanding. Charles remained stubborn, yet even he found moments of silent reflection, the rigidity of his beliefs slowly eroding under the undeniable truth of their love. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of amber, Adrian and Naomi stood in the mansion gardens, the world quiet around them. The air was fragrant with roses and jasmine, a symbol of life thriving despite its roots in controlled cultivation. "Do you ever fear them?" Naomi asked, voice tinged with uncertainty. "I mean, your family, society, the judgment." Adrian took her hands in his. "Every day," he admitted. "But love doesn't thrive in fear. It thrives in courage. And I would rather face judgment with you than live comfortably without truth." Naomi smiled, her heart swelling with both relief and anticipation. "Then let's be brave together." Their lives gradually began to intertwine more openly. Adrian worked to reshape parts of the Whitmore empire with integrity, guided by Naomi's perspective and moral compass. Where once business dealings had prioritized profit over people, now ethics and empathy gained influence. Naomi's insights proved invaluable. Her understanding of human emotion and subtlety brought a depth to Adrian's decisions that his upbringing alone could not provide. The couple faced continued challenges: social exclusion from certain elite circles, whispered gossip in society columns, and the occasional resentment from those unwilling to accept change. But each obstacle became a testament to their resilience. They learned to navigate a world that was not designed for their union, forging a path that was uniquely theirs. Naomi also pursued her music, no longer as a servant constrained to background performances, but as an artist with an audience that valued her for her skill and soul. Concerts were arranged in grand halls and intimate salons alike, each performance a testament to her journey, her courage, and the transformative power of authenticity. Adrian attended every performance, pride and love evident in his eyes. Together, they also sought to address broader societal prejudices. They quietly funded educational programs, mentorships, and initiatives aimed at bridging class and racial divides. Their love became a quiet revolution, influencing lives far beyond the walls of the Whitmore estate. As the years unfolded, Adrian and Naomi faced both triumphs and setbacks, but their bond never wavered. The world outside evolved slowly, but the truth they embodied remained a constant. They discovered that love, when anchored in integrity and courage, could not only survive the storm of societal expectation, but also transform the world around it. Finally, one evening, years after that unforgettable wedding night, Adrian and Naomi returned to the mansion balcony where it all began. The city stretched below them, lights twinkling like stars fallen to earth. They held hands, their fingers interlaced, a silent vow echoing in the space between them. "Do you think we've changed anything?" Naomi asked, her voice soft but filled with hope. Adrian smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We've changed everything that matters. And even if the world never fully understands, we've stayed true. That's enough." Naomi leaned into him, heart full. "It is more than enough. It's everything." And there, beneath the expanse of dawn-tinted sky, they allowed themselves a moment of pure, unfiltered joy. It was not merely a celebration of love, but of courage, of defiance against unjust traditions, of the human spirit's capacity to rise above prejudice and expectation. Their story became a quiet legend, whispered among those who sought hope and proof that love could indeed bridge divides. It was a testament to the power of standing firm, of listening to one's heart even when the world shouted otherwise. And in that story, Adrian and Naomi remained eternal symbols of hope, resilience, and the undeniable truth that love, when courageous and genuine, could transcend every barrier. As night fell over the mansion once more, they remained together on the balcony, gazing at a horizon that promised infinite possibilities. Each day, each challenge, each victory, and each heartbreak had led them here. And they knew, without doubt, that whatever the world might throw at them, they would face it as they always had. Hand in hand, hearts aligned, unafraid, and unwavering. The echoes of music, once timid and constrained, now filled their lives fully. And as the stars emerged, brilliant against the velvet sky, Naomi and Adrian understood a profound truth. Love, when fought for and embraced without compromise, was unstoppable. The months that followed were a test of endurance, patience, and conviction. Adrian and Naomi faced scrutiny from every angle. Whispers in the press, thinly veiled hostility from certain family members, and subtle attempts by social elites to isolate them. But they had discovered a power far more formidable than any gossip or societal expectation. Their bond, tempered in defiance, grounded in mutual respect and love, had become a fortress that could not be breached. One afternoon, a letter arrived at the Whitmore estate, unassuming but bearing the seal of a prestigious social council. Adrian opened it slowly. Naomi peered over his shoulder, her heart already anticipating both triumph and conflict. The letter, in elegant script, acknowledged the couple's work in advocating for social justice and bridging divides between classes and races. It praised their courage, calling them exemplars of integrity and progress. Adrian smiled, a rare, unguarded expression, and glanced at Naomi. "It seems the world is beginning to catch up to us," he said, voice tinged with disbelief. Naomi shook her head with a soft laugh. "Or perhaps it's finally seeing what it was too blind to notice before." The recognition was gratifying, but it was also symbolic. It was proof that standing firm, even in the face of entrenched prejudice, could create ripples that extended far beyond personal lives. And yet, their triumph was neither immediate nor absolute. Eleanor, though quieter now, still carried a shadow of disapproval. Charles remained outwardly rigid, though the occasional softened look betrayed private reflection. Some family members embraced the change, others rejected it entirely. But Adrian and Naomi had learned an important lesson. Approval was never a prerequisite for living authentically. Life continued, marked by moments both mundane and profound. They designed their daily routines around shared laughter, quiet music sessions, and heartfelt conversations that deepened their understanding of each other. Naomi's violin became more than a tool for rebellion. It became a voice for her artistry, her emotions, and the collective history she carried in her soul. Adrian, now a more confident and self-aware man, used his influence to transform business practices, advocate for fairness, and extend opportunities to those historically overlooked by the elite. On one particularly serene evening, they walked through the gardens of the Whitmore estate, the same grounds where the first tremors of their rebellion had begun months earlier. The sky blushed with the final hues of sunset, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming roses. Naomi stopped, her hand brushing against a stone fountain, eyes reflecting both nostalgia and hope. "Do you remember that night?" she asked softly, a small smile tugging at her lips. "The night I played the violin and everything changed?" Adrian took her hand, squeezing it gently. "I could never forget that music. It was the moment I realized I couldn't live a lie any longer. And it was the moment I realized you were my truth." Naomi leaned into him. "We were reckless, weren't we?" "Perhaps," Adrian admitted with a grin. "But sometimes recklessness is the only path to freedom." As the twilight deepened, a sense of accomplishment and anticipation settled over them. They had faced judgment, family expectation, and societal constraints. They had challenged entrenched hierarchies and the silent chains of tradition. And yet, despite it all, they had emerged not only intact but stronger, more united, and wiser. The couple began to expand their influence in ways both personal and public. Naomi taught music to children from underprivileged backgrounds, helping them discover voices that had long been silenced. Adrian supported these initiatives, ensuring that resources and opportunities were available to nurture talent regardless of class, race, or social standing. Together, they became beacons of hope, demonstrating that courage, integrity, and love could catalyze profound change. Even the Whitmore family, in subtle ways, began to adapt. Eleanor, once harsh and unforgiving, allowed herself to listen more, to question the rigid structures she had long upheld. Charles, though still stern, began to recognize that compassion could coexist with tradition. The house, once a symbol of oppressive expectation, became a place of dialogue, reflection, and, gradually, understanding. Amid these transformations, Adrian and Naomi found moments of profound intimacy. They traveled to cities far beyond the reach of the elite's judgment, seeking solace in anonymity and inspiration in diverse cultures. They composed music together, Naomi with her violin, Adrian with his voice creating melodies that echoed the journey they had shared. Struggle, defiance, hope, and ultimate affirmation. One night, in a quiet city cafe far from the scrutiny of the Whitmore estate, Adrian turned to Naomi. "Do you ever think about the people who doubted us?" Naomi shook her head. "I don't dwell on them. They were never meant to understand us. What matters is that we understand ourselves and each other." Adrian smiled, resting his forehead against hers. "You're right. I love that about us, that we create our own world." And they did. Their world was one of honesty, courage, and empathy. It was a space where love was celebrated, not constrained. It was a realm where mistakes could be forgiven, growth was encouraged, and authenticity was valued above pretense. Time passed, and their story gradually became legend in its own right. Friends, colleagues, and even former skeptics recounted the tale of Adrian and Naomi, a couple who defied societal expectation, who challenged class and racial prejudice, and who created a life defined not by inheritance or appearance, but by the unassailable power of truth and love. Their tale inspired others to question limitations, to confront fear, and to embrace authenticity in the face of opposition. Yet for Adrian and Naomi, the greatest victories were private. A shared glance across a crowded room, the quiet comfort of holding hands while the world slept, the simple joy of being fully seen and accepted. These moments, though small in scope, were immense in significance. They were proof that life's greatest triumphs often occur not in public accolades, but in the intimate, steadfast commitment to one another. The mansion itself, once a symbol of rigid hierarchy and unyielding expectation, became a place of reconciliation and renewal. The gardens, where Naomi and Adrian had shared countless conversations, were planted with new blooms, representing growth, resilience, and the beauty of lives lived authentically. Walls that had witnessed centuries of control and conformity now echoed with laughter, music, and dialogue. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Adrian and Naomi found themselves once again on the balcony, the world beneath them quiet and expectant. The city stretched toward the horizon, a tapestry of light and shadow, possibilities and dreams. Naomi leaned into Adrian, her head resting against his chest, and together they breathed in the promise of what lay ahead. "Do you ever wonder what the future holds?" Naomi asked, voice filled with wonder and hope. Adrian held her close. "Every day, and every day I choose us no matter what comes. That choice will never change." Naomi smiled, feeling a profound sense of peace. "Then we are ready," and they were, ready to face challenges, to create opportunities, to nurture love, and to extend the lessons of courage and authenticity to the world beyond their own lives. Their journey was far from over. The tides of society, prejudice, and expectation would continue to ebb and flow. But Adrian and Naomi had discovered something far more enduring than external validation. A love forged in adversity, anchored in truth, and resilient beyond measure. As the stars emerged, brilliant against the velvet night, they allowed themselves to dream not just of safety or acceptance, but of impact, of transformation, and of a world where love, in all its forms, could flourish unimpeded. In that quiet, starlit moment, a gentle melody rose in Naomi's mind, the notes echoing the journey they had traversed. It was a song of defiance, resilience, hope, and unyielding truth. Adrian, sensing the rhythm, hummed along softly, and together their hearts beat in harmony with a vision of life lived authentically, courageously, and passionately. The Whitmore estate, once a fortress of control, now stood as a monument to change, a living testament that courage and love could shift even the oldest foundations. Generations to come would hear stories of a maid with a violin, a wealthy heir who chose heart over wealth, and a union that defied every expectation. Their tale was not simply about love, it was about the power of truth, the necessity of courage, and the beauty of choosing authenticity even when the world demanded conformity. And though the horizon remained wide, uncertain, and at times daunting, Adrian and Naomi faced it together. Hand in hand, hearts aligned, and spirits unbroken. They had learned that the greatest victories in life were not measured in accolades or approval, but in the courage to love fully, authentically, and without compromise. The world outside might still resist, judgment might linger, and traditions might attempt to impose their weight. But Adrian and Naomi had discovered a truth that could never be undone. Love, when forged in courage and authenticity, was unstoppable. And in that knowledge, they found a freedom that no society, no wealth, no prejudice could ever take away. As the first light of dawn touched the garden blooms, Adrian whispered to Naomi, "We've come so far." Naomi, smiling, whispered back, "And we've only just begun." Together, they turned to face the horizon, their silhouettes framed by the rising sun. A new day awaited, full of possibility, challenge, and hope. And for the first time in their lives, they knew without question that they would face it side by side. Their love a beacon against the darkness, their courage a shield against fear, and their truth an unbreakable foundation upon which to build the rest of their lives. And so, in the quiet triumph of dawn, their story continued not as an ending, but as an eternal promise. That love, resilience, and authenticity could endure, inspire, and transform, even in the most unlikely of places and against the harshest of odds. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.